Welcome back to another teardown video in between. In the past few months I teared down two enterprise class SDSL to Ethernet plus ISDN boxes from Siemens. One actually quite old, you almost can call it vintage. Cards here, links in the description. Now I have here on my bench a ZyXEL Speedlink 5501 consumer, respectively small office, home office, DSL to Ethernet, ISDN and analog telephone box that includes a wireless access point. These things have reached their end of life, meaning you don't get any more software updates for them. And for security reasons, you shouldn't use them anymore. As far as I know, that model was only distributed directly by DSL providers to their customers. At least I couldn't find any downloads for that model on the ZyXEL website. But I know that the German Telekom had downloads for firmware updates for that thing on their website. Anyway, it will be interesting to see how they managed to integrate that much functionality in such a small case. Just as a comparison, this was the housing of one of the commercial SDSL to Ethernet ISDN boxes. So enjoy! The front side, and yes, that's the front, features a DSL connector, two USB connectors, probably for external storage devices, 1, 2, 3, 4 LAN ports, and a 1 over Ethernet port where you can connect a modem if you don't want to use an internal DSL modem. We also have here an ISDN connector and a power connector, and finally a real mechanical on-off switch. On the top, and the connectors are on this side, so that's really the front. We have analog phone connectors for two analog phone lines, two buttons, the VPS buttons and the VLAN button for connecting devices. And below these labels here, probably some LEDs. The back features two VLAN antennas, not removable, but you can, adjust them a little bit. As with most devices, both sides are completely featureless. On the bottom we have 4 feet, 2 slots for mounting that with screws to a wall or something, a reset switch, and 1, 2, 3 screws, but also 1, 2, 3, 4 slots that look like snap-ins. The label at the center of the back tells us it's a device from ZyXEL, a Speedlink 5501 with a model number and the serial number. And you have to use a wall wart with 12 volts and 2 amps, so 24 watts. That's less than half than the commercial units I had a look at. These used the newer one 50 watts and the older one 66 watts. Then we have here the preset SSIDs for the 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz VLAN. The VPA2 key, which is obviously generated for each and every device, configuration, HTTP address and the MAC address, and of course it's CE and you shouldn't throw it away. Pay attention. When you power that thing on, not much happens. The power LED is red and no LED test. But it seems like, I will zoom down in a second, there is actually an LED beside each and every label. So you really have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 And here is a 13th LED and a 14th LED. I don't know if they are really installed on the PCB. Oh, no, something is happening. DSL is also blinking a little bit, but yeah, that's it. Oh no, now wireless LAN is also blinking. So you see there are really LEDs beside each and every label. Now let's try to crack that thing open. I said it's only 3 screws. Yeah, my hand is in the way as always. And these are self-tapping screws. Okay, just noticed this comes off. See another feature. You can see that here are indeed 14 LEDs, or at least light pipes for LEDs. And here you can patch in directly your analog and ISDN telephone lines. Now, I didn't have much luck with these snap-ins on the enterprise units. Maybe this is a little bit easier here. Yeah, seems like. Okay, that one's open. Okay, that one's also open, and now the phone is ringing. Excuse me a second. Okay, I'm back. Let's continue. Let's jam something in here too. And go to the next snap in here. You really need 3 hands for that job. And the last one. We're in. Just to be clear, the 3 self-tapping screws went into these 3 posts. So the whole case was together by 3 screws and 4 snap-ins. And the top half of the case is made from ABS, and it was made in March 2015. And here are the 14 light pipes for the indicator LEDs. The board is of course in the bottom half, and I think we can, at least from the inside, remove these antennas. I don't know exactly the type name for these things, but these are, well, very, very small coaxial connectors for the Wi-Fi. I think the Wi-Fi antennas are also kind of snapped in. Yeah. The top half of the case is also made from ABS, and it was produced in March 2014. That leaves us with the board, and unfortunately these 2 heat sinks are glued on. So we will have a look at those chips at the very end, because it could be that removing these heat sinks is quite destructive. So let's start at the end where the power comes in here. Okay, this is going to be quite fiddly. So here's the power connector, and the first chip we encounter is that thingy. An MPEP 3425. That's a monolithic power systems 3 amps up to 55 volt boost converter. Then we have another rather large chip, fortunately, well, relatively speaking here. That's also a monolithic power systems MP1542, a 2 amps up to 22 volts boost converter. And then we have here 1, 2, and where is it? 3 little 6-pin jobs marked ADJF. That's also monolithic power systems, but these are at the maximum input voltage of 18 volts, 2 amp synchronous step-down converters. I zoom out at that point to give you an overview of that power supply section. So that was our 3 amps up to 55 volts boost converter. That works probably with that big inductor. That was a smaller 2 amps up to 22 volt boost converter, probably using that inductor. So we have 2 rails that are raised up of our 12 volt power supply. And then we have here these 3 synchronous step-down converters with their associated inductors. And they probably produce 3 rails below 12 volts. While we are zoomed out, let's have a look at that section here. The power supply section was below here. So these are the 2 connectors for the 2.4 GHz, respectively 5 GHz wireless LAN. And you see here, there is some, not really shielding, but it was probably intended at one point to put some cans up here. Anyway, let's zoom down now and have a look at these 2 chips. The 2 modules for the 2 antenna connectors are exactly identical, and we have here an SIGE, silicon germanium or something, 5005L. That's Skyworks 5 GHz power amplifier. And then we have over here something that is marked DC, and I have no idea what that is. And over there, if you can make out the markings, I was struggling, but it's something with 2, 5 and something. And I have no idea what that is, but I guess that both are part of the receive circuit for the wireless LAN. Here are these 2 identical sections zoomed out again. Each section supports one of the antenna connectors for the wireless LAN antennas. And that's the micro switch for the wireless LAN button, and that's the micro switch for the WPS button. Let's move on to the next stripe of the board, which is probably supporting the ISDN functionality. Here's the connector and the Wi-Fi stuff. So we start with that transformer here, probably an ISDN transformer. Then we move on to that group of chips here. And we will end up with that, maybe a transistor, and this really tiny thing. So that pulls, and yes, it's upside down. T5008NL is indeed an ISDN transformer. To its side we have 4 MOFs protecting the telecommunication lines. I don't know if that is really protecting the ISDN lines. These are the analog phone connectors here, so this could also, or more likely, is protecting the analog stuff. And right behind the MOF we have 2, can you read that? Let me zoom a little bit more. P61089Bs. These are, dual programmable thyristor transient voltage suppressors. That's quite a mouthful. But they are, of course, also protecting the analog lines. To the side we have here that Lantig PSB 21150. That's simply an PC ISDN adapter circuit. So that thing talks over an 8-bit interface and a serial interface to a microprocessor or microcontroller, and on the other side ISDN comes out. Further up we have 2 more chips. The big one is a Ralink RT5392L. That's the Wi-Fi chip. And the little one beside it, it's a little bit hard to read, but that's an MTEL ATMLH502. That's a serial EEPROM. I have no further information about the capacity, sorry. And on the top of the board we have that X5T955. That's actually a 140 volts PNP transistor, which is a bit odd because the very tiny package here marked IAGMF right above it, that's again a monolithic power systems 16 volt 3 amps synchronous step down converter that doesn't need an external transistor. But then that synchronous step-down converter has here its own little inductor, while that big PNP transistor is close to that rather large inductor. So yeah, maybe two more rails are generated here. However, I have no idea what is controlling that. Maybe that's on the back of the board. I have also no idea what that really large 3300 microfarad 25 volt electrolytic capacitor is for. Maybe it's some kind of buffer, yeah, instead of a battery for some real-time clock, but I haven't seen one yet. Maybe these chips have one integrated. Who knows? And I almost forgot, that quartz here, 7.680 megahertz, belongs to that PC ISDN adapter circuit. For now, I want to abandon the stripe strategy and instead cover that block here as a whole. So these probably 1, 2, 3, 4 Ethernet transformers, these two chips, these two quartz, and then we have here near the USB stuff again 2 little chips. So these 4 things are indeed GigaNet Ethernet transformers, marked MNC G2438CG. The 2 chips above our 4 gigabit transformers with their associated 25 MHz quartzes are Lantig PEF7071V, also known as MaxLinear GPY111 gigabit Ethernet transceivers. The thing is, we have 2 transceivers and 4 transformers. I don't know what's going on here. According to the datasheet, these contain each only a single gigabit Ethernet transceiver, not 2. Finally, we have the 2 small jobbies here near the USB connectors and accompanied by 100 microfarad 10 volt electrolytic capacitors. And the marking here is TI4CVCAQ, and I have nothing. Okay, for real Ethernet, USB transceivers, they don't have enough pins. So maybe they are just power management chips for the 5 volt rail that goes out on the USB connectors. Now let's have a look at these 3 chips here, which obviously support the big one in the middle. And as I mentioned, I will try to remove the heat sinks later on. And we also have a look at that thing here. So we're starting with that thing on the right top corner, 5 AM. I or 17D9RZH, and I found absolutely nothing about that. It's probably a RAM or a ROM. Then to the side of it, at top of the heatsink, we have an FL512 SAIF01. That's a 512 megabit flash from Spansion. As we go around the heatsink, please note the 36 megahertz quartz here. And then as we come around to the left side of the heatsink, we have here another Lantig chip. That's a PSB 80190V. That's a DHL, a PHY, including line drivers. And the big thing then below it here, near the edge of the board, that's of course a VDSL line transformer from UMEC UTB01930S. And I almost forgot about this area here. Yeah, we haven't covered that yet, so let's zoom in. First, an overview over the area. We have here something which is probably the same PNP transistor like that one we already covered, because it's close to the same type of inductor. Then we have that large package here. Then that very small package here close to another inductor, and then 1, 2, 3 similar looking packages, at least 2 of them also close to even smaller inductors. And please note that thing here is labeled L, so that's probably also an inductor, even if it looks like a capacitor. The transistor is indeed the same X5T955 140 volt PNP transistor. The big package is a Lantig PEF42068V. That's a dual channel line interface for analog telephony. You remember we have 2 analog telephone lines coming out of that thing. The 2 very small packages here are both marked 716X4E, and I found absolutely nothing, but it's safe to assume that there are also some step-down converters because of the inductors nearby. The small package close to the slightly larger inductor here, marked IAGMF, is another monolithic power systems chip, an MP1471. We already saw a lot of 1470s. Anyway, maximum input voltage is 16 volts, good for 3 amps peak, also a synchronous step-down converter. And finally, we have a third of these packages marked as 716X4E, also probably step-down converters, but not a clearly visible inductor nearby, unless you count the L29, L28 markings here. And this is really an inductor and not a capacitor. That brings us to the back side. Yeah, a lot of passives here around and all that stippling here for the ground plane. But chip-wise, yeah, we have that package, probably another PNP, that little thing, that, and this large one here, which is probably supporting the other big chip with the gray heatsink. So that transistor-like package is marked L351, and I got nothing. But the label besides it's U62, so that's probably a linear regulator? Who knows? Anyway, right beside it, the micro switch, that's the reset switch. The 8-pin package above it is another monolithic power systems chip, an MP111, and according to MPS, that's a dying gasp storage and release controller. And its job is to charge up during normal operations a huge capacitor. You remember that huge, I think it was 3,300 microfarad thing on the front side. And if power fails, feed some power rail from that capacitor. Why you would need that in a consumer unit or a small home office unit, I don't know. The 14-pin package in the center of the board is a Texas Instruments 74HC08, so quad AND gates. And the 16-pin package at the upper edge of the board is an NXP 74HC595D, a serial in, serial or parallel out 8-bit shift register with output latches. Outputs are all 3-state. So that means we have a total of two glue logic chips on that whole board. That's it. And the big thing on the other side of the chip with the gray heatsink is a Winbond W9812 G6KH-6. That's a 2 mega times 4 banks times 16-bit SDRAM. That's it for the backside. Now let's try to remove those heatsinks. To be honest, I'm not very optimistic because, that was quite easy. The question is, can I clean that up later on? Let's try this one here. Oh, that's actually ceramic. Yeah, but it comes off. I've never seen a ceramic heatsink before. Doesn't one come off in one piece? Oh, yeah. Perfect. Okay. Now we have to remove the silicone glue. Oh, that is coming off quite easy. Yeah, maybe, just maybe, can make some markings visible. Okay, this is getting messy. I come back to you. I was indeed able to remove the silicone stuff that was used to glue on the heatsinks. By the way, if you ever heard about ceramic heatsinks, like the one that was glued to that chip, please let me know in the comments. And that was the big capacitor that is charged and, if the power fails, discharged via that dying gasp storage and release control chip on the backside. Under the aluminium heatsink was hidden another Lantig, this time a PSB 80920EL. That's really the heart of the system, and it does everything. It does DSL, ISDN, 2 analog phone lines, either 4 10/100 base T Ethernet connections or 2 1000 base T Ethernet connections, WAN over Ethernet connection. Yeah, you remember that 5th connector at the back. 2 USB ports, and it has PCI, PCIe, SPI, SSI, RS-232, GPIO interfaces all around. So yeah, and a 500 MHz CPU that does voice over IP and networking stuff. And hidden under the ceramic heatsink is a Ralink RT3662F. And, well, that's just a dual-band 802.11n Wi-Fi chip that supports up to 3x3 antennas. But yeah, we are only seeing here 2 differential pairs going to our high-frequency sections. Well, 4 differential pairs going to our 2 high-frequency sections here. That's it for today. So Lantig went here for an all-out Lantig solution for all the telecommunication stuff, plus the networking stuff. Only exception being using that Ralink chip for Wi-Fi. And the rest of the board is really just, protection circuitry, transformers for the telephone lines, the ISDN lines, the Ethernet stuff, a little bit of USB power management, and most of all, power supply. I lost count how many step down and step up converters. There were only 2 step up converters, but I don't know, almost a dozen step-down converters all around on this board. Yeah, interesting approach, and that leaves you with just 2 chips, or 74 chips for glue logic. It's interesting. It's a total contrast to the 2 commercial units I teared down, where you had FPGAs and stuff and DSPs and such. And only a few, well, not only a few, but also application-specific chips. But most of the thing, or a lot of the functionality, was implemented in software with DSPs, FPGAs, and so on. So, till next time, bye.